It's been a while. I've meant to update things a few times over the last 5 years, but work and life just kept getting in the way. Sorry about that. In my defense, I've been going through a lot and keeping all of you safe in the process. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have done any updates if I hadn't seen so much activity on here recently. The past few months have been a major uptick in Veil activity, especially on this very forum. From someone's account of a horseman of the apocalypse ending the world to a supposed time traveler, we all got a good laugh out of that one, warning everyone about the end. I promise, there's no apocalypse hitting our way. We're making sure of that. Sorry, probably should make things a little easier to understand. If you're only seeing this post, check back on my original from 5 years ago. My dad died around the beginning of 2020, leaving plenty of unresolved childhood trauma for me to work through. Therapy's been helpful for that, but I'm not going to get into those sessions here. No, everyone was more interested in the box of tapes he left me. Reel after reel of emergency alert broadcasts that show the end of dimensions just like our own. Parallel universes blinking out thanks to aberrations taking over. Watching them, well, it took a toll on me for a while. Things were bleak, but I finally took my dad's advice and went on a search for where they came from. A search makes it seem like it took a lot of effort. I promise, if you want to find the collective, you won't. They find you. Fast, too. I had barely packed when a couple of Men in Black wannabes were at my doorstep. Guess I can't be too surprised since my dad used to work for them. Turns out there's some hereditary factor to seeing aberrations, and yours truly won the genetic lottery. They did the usual secret police stuff, blindfold me and take me elsewhere, some undisclosed location in the deep south. I'll be honest, I thought I was going to get two in the back of the head and tossed into the swamps for a few minutes there, even though I knew who they were. I think it's because I knew who they were that I thought I would die actually. They're pretty lax about whistleblowers, thanks to just how batshit everything we deal with is. But I didn't know at the time. Hell, the old posts are still up, and I'm allowed to write these out too, in the words of my superior officers. Blow off steam, because nobody is going to fucking believe me anyway. Honestly, it's freeing. I dealt with HIPAA for a healthcare job while I was still in college, and this place is much more relaxed than that. Anyway, neither here nor there. They transported me KGB style to a base the collective has down in the south, and there was a welcoming committee of one guy. He was nice enough, older, kind smile, said his name was Ronald. Not even joking, this was more like a corporate job orientation than anything else, and thinking back, it's almost comical how laid back everything was. He even made sure to tell me about the dental benefits, and that's more than any job would have given me with my doctorate's degree. To put things bluntly, the collective monitors something called the veil in our world. The veil protects us, keeps everything separate from other realities that can get really weird and really dangerous. Depending on what goes down, the veil makes sure that it doesn't spill over into our realities. Usually anyway. Sometimes, depending on the severity of what goes down in other realities, tears can form in the veil. That's when we have a problem. Tears have to be stitched up as soon as they happen. Otherwise, the shit happening backstage spills out into a very unwitting audience. According to Ronald, there was a pretty high uptick in tears that started about a year before Dad died. Guess I know what made his heart finally give out. Essentially, there are two divisions in the collective that prevent apocalyptic events from spilling over into our reality. The first is the Observation Division, which is where I ended up stationed. We keep an eye on everything beyond the veil, all the other parallel universes out there, and use that to help predict where things could go wrong, essentially stopping them before they get a chance to take hold on home turf. The Intervention Division monitors our own side of the veil. They have cognizance set up on 24/7 monitors, looking all over the world to make sure that when and if any tears open up, we can have agents on the ground to fix it as soon as possible. I'm not even going to try to explain how they close the tears back up because that's something well beyond my pay grade. But they stitch it back up like professional seamsters and keep the rest of you none the wiser. Now, when it comes down to this forum, we've been seeing a lot of posts pop up from other parallel dimensions, which is odd considering it's a digital platform. Usually, analog is the only way to observe or record anything that comes through the veil. So posts over the internet are definitely something new that we're still figuring out how to deal with. For example, A couple of months ago, there was a post that made it surprisingly high. Thankfully, most everyone thought it was a work of fiction, perks of the game I guess, and disregarded it. It was a direct eyewitness account of the biblical apocalypse. I mean, big B biblical, 4 horsemen, Book of Revelations level shit. Heartbreaking to read, considering it ended with the witness committing suicide to avoid being taken. But it gave us the heads up we need to figure out something bad was on the way. Thanks to that post, we were able to stop an aberration that would have wiped out 90% of the Earth in one day. Then we get weird shit like the New Year's Eve 2024 incident. A guy claimed to be a time traveler, coming to warn us about the impending tears that were popping up all over the veil in his timeline before he blew the brains out of his childhood self and his parents. Thankfully, the collective found him before he was able to get through the door of his childhood home. Look, I don't know how the collective in his universe operated, but holy shit were they bad at their jobs. Fuckers sent a man through a tear like it was going to send him back in time. Idiots should have known time travel doesn't work that way. And that tear just sent him to a whole different dimension. Ours. Yeah, his warning would have gone nowhere, because we were already on the anomaly that caused all those tears in the first place, unlike his collective. What a catastrophic failure that was. Not to mention how it endangered countless other universes along with his own. Fun or not so fun fact. We did an observation on his dimension not long after apprehending him. That shit is gone. I mean gone like wiped from the fabric of reality. They really fucked up. All thanks to the work of us in the observation division and those that came before us. We're still here safe. I know humans have been doing a good job of fucking up their own lately. Trust me, compared to some of the shit that the collective has taken out of play in the past few decades, we've gotten off lucky. Ronald gave me access to all of dad's old case files when I started here too. Said to think about it like a kind of signing bonus that would help me learn more about him, I guess. Let me tell you, what he snuck out on those VHS tapes was enough to desensitize me to a lot. But what was still in here was... damn, it was something I never expected. Seeing a spider god emerge and nuclear zombies devastate everything was nothing. Alright, I'm going to stop my ramblings about what I've been through. If anyone wants more information about the collective, I can easily answer questions. Like I said, they don't give a shit who talks because it's not like anyone is going to take this seriously in the first place. I've got case files to share though. Some of dad's, some from the people before him, and some from my own cases that I've worked on. Like I said, I've been really busy since taking up a job here, but in between delving into his old stuff, trying to figure out who the man that barely raised me really was, I've had my own fair share of brushes with the strange and deadly. Enough yapping. I know what you're here for. The Coffin. Earth Designation 38994. Case file of Jeremiah, redacted. December 13, 1981. Intercepted some concerning news broadcasts from Earth 38994 yesterday. That universe got ahead of the space race in a big way, with America beating the Soviets by over a decade and branching out with privatized aerospace contracts in the ensuing years. Since then, it has been a mad frenzy for them, with everyone trying to work on space projects. One company is building a huge base on the moon to find out what lies beneath. Another is customizing space stations for the rich and famous to hide away in the event Earth ends up going to hell. The one we need to keep an eye on though is Avery's Corporation. I haven't been able to find an analogous company here for them, but they're huge over there and trying to figure out faster than light travel. News broadcast is touting that they'll be launching their first test flight of a special nuclear fission engine later tonight. Even found a way to broadcast what they see. Though there's not going to be any way to get a signal until they're out of FTL speed. Agatha is backing me on this one. She's been doing her usual thing and saying dark, cryptic things. Ever since the spider incident a few years ago, she's been in rough shape. But I don't think anything spooked her this bad since. We're having a little watch party later on. Her words in the meantime make me want to jump into a fire just to get rid of the cold chill they gave me. Everyone thinks outrunning the sun is a good idea, until they find out the darkness is faster. 14th of December, 1981. Test flight unsuccessful. The ship took off around noon Eastern Time, and judging by the broadcast that was being sent from the ship, actually made it to their destination. Simple enough, they were just supposed to hop to the edge of the Milky Way and then make the return flight. Broadcast came in almost right on time, though it's not like they could see a whole lot. There was vague light from some stars, but mostly it was just the dark void of empty space. Then this. I swore for a minute some cheap sci-fi movie cut in. It looked like this huge carved stone coffin floating right by the camera, bright chains wrapping all around it, reflecting any light that dared get too close with their shiny links. This thing had to be bigger than a planet. It was obviously some distance from the ship, but we only saw it for a few minutes before the signal was lost again, seemingly jumping to FTL speed and losing the broadcast. It stayed out for about 2 minutes. Agatha and I were about to cut the feed, figuring that was it and our worries were unfounded. Maybe the people on board had some kind of sense about them and turned around instead of investigating whatever that thing was. Feed came back though, and I don't think I felt my stomach drop this bad since the Heaven incursion on Earth 84778 a couple of years ago. The camera was reeling through empty space, spinning around so that nothing stayed in frame for more than a few seconds. But luckily, not with fast enough velocity that everything was incomprehensible. Debris was everywhere, making it hard to see through it all. But then, well, we saw the chains floating free, links broken. I assume they aimed right at the coffin and dialed the FTL engine to the max, hitting it head-on to break it open. We were on edge watching from here. The camera rotation kept revealing what was happening piece by piece. First, we saw the massive slab holding the coffin shut start to lift, a long blackened hand extending to push it up further. As it opened further, stars in the background began to blink out, one by one. The thing that emerged was a manifestation of darkness, night made physical. It was huge, dark wings sprouting from its back, and no definable features on its skin. It looked humanoid, though with tendrils of darkness wrapped around it. It was kinda hard to tell. As it rose from the coffin, it seemed to begin absorbing any light that came near it, sucking it in like a black hole, singularity blazing against its skin, absorbing any energy it saw. The camera eventually flew towards it, getting sucked into the darkness and losing broadcast signal. That was enough to let us know this world was a lost cause. Whatever this thing was, there's no way that humanity could put those chains back. We'll continue observation for the coming days, but, well, it was a broadcast on international television there, so they're already in rough shape. December 15, 1981. Notice to all collective personnel and contractors. Going forward, there is a moratorium on the study of light speed or faster than light travel in any form. Even theoretical physics pertaining to lightspeed travel are prohibited until we can figure out what this thing is and ensure it doesn't exist on our side of the veil. Thank you for your understanding. Jeremiah. December 16, 1981. As expected, things aren't going well for that version of Earth. Not long after the broadcast aired, people started taking to the streets, demanding to know who greenlit the project, going after government officials and the CEO of Avarise to hold them to justice for dooming humanity. Meanwhile, space telescopes and satellites on the far side of the Milky Way were sending back images of a galaxy that was becoming less and less crowded of stars by the moment. Everything that could give off light, from stars to small clusters of radiation and space dust, were slowly absorbed into, well, whatever the hell the thing was. Agatha named it the Night Emperor. Sounds like a Conan villain in my opinion, but I'll let her stick with naming things. Feels wrong to give whatever this thing was a name that sounds like a comic villain when it's about to slaughter an entire universe. News broadcasts are giving hourly updates on information they get, including new pictures, and at one point, a live video feed from a space telescope that was launched a few years ago. The Night Emperor, as of 1600 hours Eastern Time Zone here, has successfully absorbed every star and nebula it's crossed, and is now just outside the orbital track of Neptune. Judging by the rate it's going, it will reach Earth within the next day. Humanity is taking it about as well as to be expected. Some have splintered into cult factions that are offering up politicians, scientists, and other figures to the Night Emperor in an attempt to broker peace. Unfortunately for them, this thing just doesn't care. It seems to only have the motivation to spread darkness where it goes. I would like to note that the darkness that follows it doesn't only emanate from it, but grows, spreading like a corruption over all it touches. I can't say for sure that anything it absorbs is necessarily destroyed, so much as it is just swallowed and left in an eternal state of night, as no light seems capable of penetrating this dark. December 17, 1981. Agatha posited that the Night Emperor would not stop at Earth. I fear she was correct. Upon reaching the orbital path of Earth early this morning, I fully expected that being to stop. Perhaps I have been reading too many pulp stories. In their reality though, the Night Emperor is as uncaring for life as the darkness it brings. Earth was an afterthought to it, simply passing by with little care. News stations set up outside to get a view of it as it passed, and the footage is something that will stay with me forever. In broad daylight, this thing just passes by, larger than Earth itself. The face could be clearly seen as it passed. Pure darkness for the most part, with no mouth to speak of, but one massive, bulging white eye right in the middle. I can't help but be reminded of the Greek myth of Erebus, the god of primordial darkness. Even before Earth and the sun, there was the darkness that man would come to fear, for no other reason than the unknown that lurks within it. It passes by Earth, and the darkness began to spread across the land not long after. Reports flooded in of people going out during bright daylight, only to be attacked brutally by their own shadows, unable to fight back as their own darkness fought its way in. A reporter doing an outdoors segment when the Night Emperor passed by watched in horror, recorded live for everyone to see as their shadow unstuck itself from the pavement in the daylight. It just grew from the sidewalk, the air popping as it lengthens in the bright sunlight, the Night Emperor leaving it behind as it continued on toward the great star that brought us all life. Then, it grabbed the reporter, one long hand on either side of her head, spindly fingers reaching into her mouth as it tore her jaw from her skull, ducking into her now eternally screaming mouth and forcing its entire being down into her body. Tendrils swirled around her, dark shadows breaking through her skin as it settled into its new home before she began attacking the others around her. The rest of the day followed much the same, with others falling victim to their own shades in quick succession. The shadows that took over then would lend their help to others so they could get their own skin suits, darkness invading everyone. No amount of light could stop it, not since the Night Emperor was free. The last broadcast that came through was from a station still holding out somehow. They were staying in shade, and they theorized that was able to camouflage them from their own shadows long enough to get the final moments of Earth on analog. The Night Emperor, still massive in the sky, floated ever closer to the sun, the center of all life, and simply absorbed it. One moment, it was there. The next, it had been taken into the Night Emperor, plunging everything in the universe into eternal darkness. There was a brief cacophony of screams on the broadcast before the fluorescent lights in the studio revealed shadows coming in from every crack outside as frost began to quickly form everywhere. Earth 38994 has officially been deemed a lost cause as of 2000 hours Eastern Standard Time. It's recommended that the moratorium on light speed and faster-than-light travel continue until further notice, barring any confirmation of the Night Emperor's casket in our universe. Glitch. Earth designation 73475. Case file of Mark. Redacted. April 23, 2021. Okay, think I'm doing this right. Sun is still teaching me the ropes of how to use the interdimensional viewers. So with luck, I won't fuck this up and cause an aberration to come through or something. Sun also tells me that's not possible. But I mean, I don't really know what's possible anymore. I caught Earth 73475 while doing mass surveillance the other day. Noticed that there were some odd issues cropping up here and there. Stuff appearing where it shouldn't, or not being where it should. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that this world had been experiencing a series of disappearances that were increasingly going unexplained. People there one minute, gone the next, like they just slipped right out of existence. Honestly, people popping out of being one by one would be one of the quieter apocalyptic events that they could be blessed with. Unfortunately, it's gotten worse. I'm going to write the explanation here only because I've had to explain it a few times to the older cognizants already, and I'm tired of repeating myself. People in this reality are clipping out of existence. It's a video game term usually, means that things are changing position in three-dimensional space, often without moving of their own volition, and frequently passing through otherwise solid objects when doing it. In a video game, you just end up clipping through to a new empty space though, usually, and end up having to reset. Here though, it's having worse effects. Most of the missing people started getting discovered after a few days to weeks thanks to decomposition. Their bodies would usually get clipped a few feet away from wherever they were at the moment, but more often than not, they would end up inside solid objects. Some people would get yanked from walking on the street to suddenly embedded under 12 tons of concrete below. A cafe in Manhattan ended up finding a guy partially fused to the back of their walk-in freezer one day, the half of him inside the freezer, frozen solid after being stuck there overnight. Meanwhile, the other half was stuck in the wall of stainless steel and insulation. Truth be told, things ended up being gruesome. It's starting to make sense though, because there have also been unexplained breakouts in the past few weeks all over this universe. People jumping to their deaths suddenly from windows or off the top of buildings. Except, no windows would be open. There would be no hints of ideation, anything like that. Turns out, they were just getting suddenly popped through empty space a few feet in one direction, teleporting them straight through walls so they could plummet to their deaths. What a shit show. Those were the merciful deaths, of course. As time has gone on, the glitches have started occurring more and more, with people clipping in more strange ways, or only partially. I got into some of the street cameras in LA and saw one poor lady stuck from her shoulders down in the sidewalk on Hollywood Boulevard. She was one of those costume characters that try to scam tourists for expensive pictures. Had on one of the worst Elsa wigs I've ever seen. But God, blood pouring from her mouth as she was crushed to death by displaced concrete wasn't something anyone deserved. The glitches are becoming more frequent. I've sent a contact to the collective of this universe to hopefully find out what they know. April 29, 2021. Clipping isn't the only problem now. I swear, this universe is running off what we would see as a bad video game build. Some materials and areas have suddenly started de-rendering from their reality. It's like they'll be fine one minute, but then the next, they either pop out of existence entirely, becoming simply a flat picture of what was once there, or they experience a massive downgrade where people begin popping into pixels and polygons, distorting painfully in ways that no human body should bend. It's not only people either, because entire buildings suddenly becoming flat, and when they do, everyone in them is mercilessly flattened inside. Collective agents have responded to sites of these render issues to find humans pancaked wherever they were standing or sitting at the time, totally flattened. Not sure if the render issue itself is the killer, or if the sudden pressure change maybe kills them first. The collective of their reality is just as baffled as we are. Interestingly, they've had many less aberrations on average than we or other universes have had. The only thing of note they've dealt with in recent years are humans exhibiting control over different types of glitches, but testing on these humans hasn't led to any answers. They all mention a demo, but nothing of note on how to get there other than near-death experience. Sounds cliche, in my opinion, but that's how it works. May 3rd, 2021. Glitched humans? I think they're humans, or at least they were humans at one point, maybe a precursor at that, have been steadily appearing. They're like us from far away, but when you get a closer look, you can see just how far off they are from us. They're human in shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, between 4 feet and 7 feet tall usually. Except when you see one up close, their faces and features, down to their clothes, are practically painted onto their bodies. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was almost comical at first, because they look like really bad late PS1 and PC models. Despite the uncanny look, they're wreaking havoc. They can appear seemingly anywhere at any time, hovering over the ground and sliding over it like they're on some preset path. Anything they pass by ends up glitching, clipping around rapidly, stretching and elongating like a rubber band being pulled into too many directions. Human, animal, Car, building, art installation, it doesn't matter. Soon as these glitches get close, they corrupt them. Dozens of people have been caught in their path, going through intense pains as their bodies are contorted far beyond human limits. Meantime, these things only make a sound like a program crashing, the same sound clipping and restarting on itself until it's one constant, deep roar of binary rage. Data is killing everyone, and they have no idea how to stop it. I have some of our software engineers doing examination of the universe now, but I fear it's not going to be fast enough. I figure since it looks so much like a game, maybe they'll be able to find something wrong. Maybe there's a bad line of code in the fabric of this universe. If they can find it, maybe they can fix it. May 6, 2021. It's gone. I swear it was. It was like across the globe multiple glitch NPCs just appeared all at once. I don't know if it was the force of them spread across that wide of an area, or if it was just like some predetermined event. But the entire world contorted, stretching, pulling people from the surface and making gravity go crazy as the world bent and folded in on itself. Within moments, it was all over. There's nothing there now. When I try to enter the surveillance for this Earth, there's nothing to be found in the data. It's like whoever was in charge of it came back to see just how many glitches there were, and just pressed delete on it. Whatever it was, I hope we don't have a delete button somewhere that we're unaware of. I've instructed the engineers to do a thorough examination, make sure our world isn't just some bad game of Civ that someone forgot about. I don't think I'll be able to blow off steam with video games again for a while. Earth Devours, Earth 13211, Case File of Mark, Redacted, November 4th, 2022. I've been keeping an eye on this Earth for a few months. Everything on it has checked out as normal for the most part, but something kept bringing me back. It started with reports of cities sinking into the ground, just fractions of inches at first a couple months ago, but a lot of places like New York and Seattle were noticing that it was causing foundational issues with areas of the city. Even more, they noticed some of the underground disappearing, sinking even further into the earth like it was being absorbed. Turns out, it was. It didn't just stop with the cities or buildings either. The news yesterday from this place had a video some guy took while he was out on a hike with his wife. They were in Appalachia, just walking along a trail. He was getting on his wife's nerves, filming her from behind as they walked and making comments on the view, when suddenly, she was just gone. At first, it's like she just disappeared, and for a moment I had the fear that it was the glitch universe all over again, like corrupted files spreading across the computer drive and taking over other universes. When you slow down the video though, the earth below her literally opens up to swallow her. It's a small opening, just enough for her to fall through before she can even scream. But then, she's gone. Then similar stuff started popping up throughout in the last 24 hours. People just being taken by the earth, swallowed whole like a bite-sized snack for Mother Nature. Then the cities began to crumble in the past couple of hours, and we realized that things have only gotten exponentially worse. Entire cities are disappearing, swallowed completely by the ground beneath. In their place, new flora pops up, beautiful flowers of every color imaginable, trees sprouting from the ground and shooting into the sky, hundreds of years of growth in mere minutes. I can only assume that Earth finally had enough of humanity destroying it, so it decided to eat the cancer taking over the surface. Nature is healing, but humanity is unlikely to survive. November 6, 2022. It only took a few days. I'm amazed. The Earth has essentially retained all wild and plant life, but humans have become the #1 enemy of creation. Any man-made structures have been taken, reclaimed by the dirt below. Humans who dare to step out are almost immediately swallowed alive, with no idea where they go. We lost any contact with their collective hours ago, their headquarters seemingly swallowed by something unknown. The universal surveillance beacon can't find any signs of human life where it is now, and that means we don't have any direct view of the planet. I'm afraid it's all gone, just like that. The Deep Sleeper, Earth Designation 38299, Case File of Jeremiah, Redacted, April 17, 2003. I've already pissed off my share of the private enterprise sector working for this hellhole, but I think I may have made a lot of enemies today. Jesus, I'm probably going to have to get my family under security the way that oil CEO was looking at me during the emergency meeting. Oh well, I'll take that up with Ronald and see if he can get me a meeting with the director later this week. In the meantime, at least I know we aren't going to make the same mistakes here that I saw happen on 38299. Drilling operation happening at Point Nemo, deepest point in the ocean, managed to hit something. Intercepted their communications, and it escalated pretty quickly. First they thought it was just a layer of bedrock or something, maybe volcanic rock, I don't know. They tossed around a lot of bullshit. Then, the seismic activity started. They pivoted over to thinking it was a piece of the tectonic plate, and they just caused a shift. Then, the damn thing stood up. I can't stress enough how deep Point Nemo is, but whatever they hit down there, they woke it up. It stood, rising from the ocean and knocking out the platform within seconds. It was grotesque, covered in rough scales, the size of small islands, towering over the ocean and high into the clouds above. Meanwhile, the legs it was standing on were still somehow able to keep it upright in the water. Damn thing had to be miles tall, 4 feet holding it up, and huge, serrated claws at the end of its forearms. I'm assuming the bedrock the drill hit was likely the surface of one of the scales, and that it in turn woke it up. If we're being honest, I don't believe it held any kind of malice toward humans. A majority of the first casualties were simply due to the sheer size of the thing. It rose from the ocean, and in turn, that displacement of water led to tsunamis large enough to wipe out most coastal areas on Earth. Smaller countries were doomed from the start. In only minutes, the rising water took out Japan, Greenland, most of Hawaii, the Korean Peninsula, half of India, and a vast majority of Central America. Those at higher elevations, while suffering less significant damage, weren't immune either. Most terrifying and intriguing, in my opinion, is that the creature let out a massive roar after the first instance of waking up. This roar cleared the entire atmosphere around it, changing clouds, wind currents, and barometric pressure in most of the region. In turn, that caused massive storms to form all across the world, eventually spreading back to where the creature itself was. It seems the storm was for the purpose of calming it though. As the rain came, it began to grow less agitated. The creature eventually, after moving around and causing more smaller tsunamis that did further damage to inland areas, combined with the newly risen sea levels, settled back down. Damage was unfortunately already done though, and this thing had stirred up enough ancient ocean life on the bottom of the sea that there was no turning back. It woke other things up during its brief awakening, and those ended up going after humanity with a vengeance. These, well, mermaids would be too lovely of a word to put on it. These things were like the sirens of old myth, taking advantage of anyone trying to rescue or work relief for the already devastated world. They would hide in the water, calling out for help in human voices, begging for someone to come rescue them. When anyone did, they were devoured. The sirens tore them to pieces, taking pleasure in the spray of warm blood as it washed over them. They were pale things, skins nearly translucent in the dark light of the storms. The last thing many saw was their sharp fangs into their flesh. Rescue efforts, scattered and mostly useless as they were, fell prey to other, distorted sea life throughout the next few days. Massive fish would lure survivors in boats or floating on debris with bright lights, almost appearing like the lights of a search crew looking for survivors, only to emerge from the depths and swallow them. The rain just kept going, and after a few days, there was hardly any land left to call home. The scattered remnants of humanity continued on in boats and barges, but the hunting sea life ensured nowhere was safe. I wrote this one off as a loss pretty early, and put out a stop to any drilling around Point Nemo within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Not sure if that giant thing is down there, but it's better not to take the risk. As with all moratorium notices, I had to give my case to the director and private sector leadership so as to consult on what they could do as an alternative. These jackasses from the oil companies didn't want any kind of alternative, just kept saying that they had taken the proper measures for drilling there, and that my decision would lead to a potential crash of the industry. Told them I was fine with that. No doubt the bastards are going to try some intimidation tactics to get us to lift the measures. I'll have Ronald set something up with the director to get security for Penelope and Mark. Maybe it's just me being paranoid from seeing the worst in humanity during observation, but I don't know. Immersion, Earth 38848. Case file of Mark, redacted. February 14, 2023. Talk about depressing. The folks in research and development have been trying to come up with a new way to look in on other universes the past few years. Mostly because even the most outdated universes are starting to phase out analog technology. They have found some ways of hacking into some digital feeds. But it's a total crapshoot, thanks to different universes' variants in binary code or some shit. I don't know, not my department. Well, now they've found a new way that would let us, cognizants, take a peek into our own minds, so to speak. They brought us a VR system that allows us to basically take a backseat to ourselves in other universes. Honestly, it works out pretty well. I've been doing some research, and we usually keep up with alternate versions of important persons throughout these other worlds. One thing that I noticed, cognizants aren't consistent across universes. By that I mean, each universe has its own unique cognizants, if they have them at all. We found quite a few places that don't even have their own version of the collective, so things obviously aren't uniform. But in all of the multiverse, I'm the only version of Mark, redacted, that has cognizant ability. So, they gave us the VR headset, and we strap it on, find alternate versions of ourselves, and basically get to backseat drive with them. They have no idea we're there, of course, and we have no control over their actions, but it gives us a direct view of what's going on the ground, which made this Earth all the more depressing to see. It was an odd one. I tuned in yesterday, taking up my spot with the headset and picking this Earth out of all the possible other versions of me. To be honest, I had some ulterior motives. This version of Earth was one where, with no collective, Dad was present for the most of my life. Mom was alive. Things seemed nice. I had finished up my doctorates, had a pretty successful business, and things were good. Went to have a Sunday dinner at my parents' house every weekend. Got to see all of us be happy. Live like a normal family. Then, the happy came. It was an insidious disease. Nobody was able to figure out the cause for it, because every attempt at it just led to the same dead end. Nobody could stay focused to research it long enough to find a cure, because they were too busy filling their heads with dopamine and endorphins while barely batting an eye. It was bliss, and it damned us all. Shit, I shouldn't say us. They warned me about confusing the me here and the me there. Keep your life separate, because you have a job to do here. People depend on you, Mark. It started in December of 2022. A company called Aeolaer. I've seen them a few times in Dad's old case files. They were found to be pulling some seriously unethical experiments on their employees across multiple lines of business. This place was like a mega corporation, fingers all over manufacturing, shipping, the medical field, food, you name it. Anyway, first cases came to light in December, and everything has gone so downhill in the last few weeks. It's hard to believe it'll last much longer. The first news reports were about the happiest workplace in America, an Aeolaer packaging facility that had the highest rate of worker satisfaction recorded, with everyone giving glowing reviews and talking about their excitement to come into work every day. Their production had more than tripled in the past month, along with the change in attitude. A few days later, some whistleblower came forward to say exactly why that was. Aeolaer was leaking chemicals into the facility that were causing a constant massive release of dopamine into workers' brains. In any normal world, this would have led to a lawsuit and the company getting shut down. Instead, it became one of the most highly demanded secrets in the business sector. Companies were clamoring to try and steal the chemical formula from Aeolaer and put it to use in their own workplaces, believing this could be the answer to the economic unrest that was starting to show through the cracks of the worldwide system. Of course, Aeolaer in their infinite wisdom, stupidity, greed, whatever you want to pin it on, never did any long-term testing of their chemical concoction. So, the mass, non-stop dopamine releases that were happening didn't stop once the employee clocked out for the day. It kept on going, even after they got home. Whether the chemical leaked out into the world and started causing genetic changes or what, nobody knows. But it started to spread beyond the workers. Maybe something in the chemical state in their system then passed like a contagion. Maybe they were lying about it being chemical and using some form of technology that got into the wrong hands, Maybe they created a bioweapon instead. Who the hell knows? By mid-January, there was an epidemic of happiness sweeping the globe. Bad thing about being constantly happy is that your own joy and contentment overrides any sense of self-preservation. Why do anything to trigger the dopamine rush to the brain if it's just going to keep on going no matter what after all? God, it was like losing them all over again. I was plugged in, doing my due diligence to see if this was a potential apocalypse or something humanity might miraculously recover from. But in turn, I had to lose my parents all over again. I went over there for Sunday dinner this past weekend. Or the other me went. I think it's the last time we'll see our parents. Dinner was usually bubbling away on the stove when I walked in their house. Today, there was nothing. Even the usual reruns of old movies that Dad would sit and watch on weekends weren't playing on the television in the living room. Something was off from the moment we stepped foot inside. We found them laying in bed, eyes nearly glazed over from bliss, smiles on their faces. They would hardly react to anything that we did or said. Eyes didn't respond to external stimulus. Judging by how they looked, they had been lying there for a few days. There were noticeable stains on the sheets to show they had soiled themselves there. But it was like they didn't care at all. The other me, I think he's starting to feel the effects too. I took off as soon as I saw Mom and Dad smiling like that. I figured I would check back in later to see what's going on. Came back earlier today, and the other me is just sitting on their couch. I honestly don't think he ever left the house after finding them. He's just sitting there. I can see his smile in the reflection of the television. No matter how much I hope that he's going to make some move, get up and leave, or even just look at his phone, nothing happens. I'll check back in a couple of days, but I fear this one is lost. February 17, 2023. I can't find a living version of me on that earth. I believe he may have starved to death, sitting there on that old couch, smiling like an idiot. God, what a way to go. Knocking on Heaven's Door, Earth 84778. Case file of Jeremiah, redacted. July 12, 1979. I was raised religious. Mom would always tell me when we were going through tough times that angels were watching over us. I knew it gave her some comfort, but I was honestly indifferent to the thought. Figured if angels were watching over us, they were doing the bare minimum job of keeping things together. After today, I hope those bastards are staying far, far away from me. Earth 84778 has been going through what I would call a second enlightenment, at least in the United States there. Lots of people getting taken in by religious fervor, notably that of the Christian Bible. Being an evangelist is one hell of a profitable career around these parts if you do it right. But over on this earth, it can be a downright kingmaker for some. They don't quite have their own Billy Graham, but some of the folks over there are on the verge of launching very literal crusades that would make their ancestors tell them to pump the brakes. One of the most famous evangelists in this universe, N. Hauser, makes it a habit to lead a worship service every Sunday morning, live broadcasting it across the nation. Does it out of huge football stadiums, rents them out before games on Sunday afternoons, even made some deals with the universe's version of the NFL to do discount tickets for his congregation. He's got a hell of a lot of sway too, considering he sits on the board of Averise Corporation in his universe. Okay, a little background though. In the past few months, attendance has been falling off, with a more modern spiritualist movement starting to take up from grassroots organizations across the country. This new pop-up emphasizes a more non-corporate form of congregation, urging that the message has gotten too clouded and convoluted by modern capitalism. Considering the amount of advertisements behind Hauser when he's at the pulpit, I'm inclined to agree with them. Well, it looks like Hauser and his people had a little idea to try and kneecap these new movements while reinforcing their own base at the same time. Stage an attack on their congregation. Sunday morning service was going strong last weekend. Over 70,000 people in attendance, singing along to old hymns, when suddenly, an explosion rocks the stadium. One of Hauser's men had planted bombs in the choir gallery, killing nearly 60,000 people. You would think to make it look natural, Hauser would have, I don't know, encouraged people to evacuate? Said some words of memorial maybe? Instead, he runs up to the pulpit, frothing like a madman, tells people that the church is under attack, that they needed to stand strong and plant their feet in the foundation of the Lord and starts preaching. I've gotta tell you, I've seen a lot of weird stuff during my time here. This one was egregious in some of the worst ways. Live on television, broadcast across the United States and some European countries, Hauser went on a 3-hour spiel about how no enemies will be able to hide from the light of God. Dead bodies on the ground behind him, giant cross that was behind the pulpit up in flames, blood and dismembered limbs all over the place. Billy Graham, eat your fucking heart out. Well, apparently, God, or whatever was up there, wasn't very happy with having their followers slaughtered in a false flag. When Hauser started demanding everyone bow their heads in prayer, up on stage with arms spread wide, like he was going to be crucified for their sins next, they started to appear. The angels. There was a loud blast, like an entire brass band blowing on their instruments at once, all in discordant notes, and suddenly they were everywhere. Sunday school always gave me this image of angels that definitely didn't prepare me for the real thing. Usually, they showed us these tall people with halos and robes, playing harps or carrying trumpets. No, these were just eyes, hundreds of eyes floating freely in clusters, freely moving around each other as light emanated from an unseen core. Most everyone left in the stands was incinerated on contact upon making eye contact with the angels. Though it sounded garbled, I swear I heard one say the old cliche, "Be not afraid" line. Hard not to be afraid when you're staring down a cluster of eyes surrounded by pillars of flesh though, especially when they're giving off enough light to make Oppenheimer wins. Hauser, that son of a bitch, stood his ground. I don't know if it was because he actually wasn't afraid, or just because he was that far gone in his zealotry, but he stood his ground on live television with an angel, staring them down, until the angel zapped him with a ray of light, leaving behind a towering shining pillar of salt where he stood. Maybe God was watching from heaven the whole time, waiting to see what direction humanity was going to go. I like to think he saw one man kill off thousands of his devoted followers and decided that there was no redeeming any of them. Whatever he decided, that was the end of 84778. The angels descended on the entire world, floating their way through cities and countryside. Those that bowed in reverence were given merciful deaths, if they even were deaths. I saw some in the football stadium bow before the angel, and suddenly their clothes fell to the ground, no longer hanging on bodies. It would be a mercy if they were sent straight to heaven for their compliance. Some governments attempted to fight the newfound enemy. It went about as well as you would think. I saw news footage we intercepted of a nuclear warhead being launched straight at one of them. It hit the cluster of eyes head on, but instead of exploding, it was just absorbed into the light that was already emanating from it. In return, this angel shot back the thinnest beam of light, like a piece of thread screaming through the air, and the plane that launched the missile was gone, blown into thousands of pieces. I thought they were going to be the worst of it. But then, the trumpets began. These massive beings appeared in the sky 2 days ago, each holding a long golden trumpet. Some were holding bowls, others giant scrolls. Look, I may have been bored as hell in Sunday school as a kid, but the Book of Revelations had always kept my interest in a morbid way. I knew what these things were, the hosts of heaven. I don't need to see any further. This world is lost. Agatha has said she'll be keeping watch just to make sure all the data is recorded. But I think she's just too morbidly curious for her own good. Until it's over, I told her she could keep an eye on it. I'm only to be alerted if the big man himself shows up. A letter from Mark, redacted, to Ronald H., redacted. Ronald, when Dad first left me these letters and tapes, he told me that there might be a pattern he was missing. Something to predict what's causing most of it. While I don't believe I found a pattern per se, I do believe I found an indicator that could help us predict apocalyptic events earlier and possibly reinforce our own survivability. I'd like to get permission to use the monitoring systems to take entropy measurements on various universes for my own research. I've noticed a pattern of more aggressive entropy growth in universes that may have been ending. I believe this entropy growth is tied to the veil tearing in our universe as well, as some universes simply outgrow the pocket of space they're given to exist in before it can grow with their regular levels. Another common threat I've noticed in apocalyptic scenarios is the Ava Corporation. They seem to have their fingers everywhere when there's a major world-ending scenario. and I believe their existence has something to do with the increased entropy growth. Perhaps their experiments or just mere presence in the universe is causing fluctuations. I would also like to put an injunction to search all private business records in our universe to ensure they don't have any kind of loose counterpart here. Call it a hunch, but I believe this could help save our asses in the future. Thanks, Mark. Scorched Earth 38922. Case file of Mark, redacted, November 13, 2023. I don't know that this is so much of a newly emerging event, but this Earth has been hurtling toward the end pretty quickly for a while now. A massive amount of manufacturing and drilling has destroyed their ozone layer, leading to increased UV rays reaching the surface of the Earth. Along with this, there has been a huge increase in gamma radiation. This has made the world nearly inhospitable. The surface is burning, with humans suffering intense sunburns from even the briefest exposure to daylight. Stay out too long, and essentially, the unguarded radiation cooks the human brain. This had led to a rise in those that are being called scorched on the Earth, who turn incredibly violent after being in the sun for too long. Between widespread famine due to the burning of cropland, massive outbreaks of fire throughout the world, with wildfires even breaking out at the summit of Mount Everest in the past year, things are looking grim. At least 1.6 billion have died of starvation throughout the world in the past 6 months, and that number is only going up. For those that haven't begun to succumb to starvation yet, the scorched are quickly becoming an even worse threat. These individuals have taken to stripping all of their clothes, running through cities and towns to find still living individuals to add to their numbers. They've been dragging people from their homes in recent weeks, nearly crucifying them up on wooden boards so that they become sunsick, just like the others. Then, taking them down once they're good and fried in the head, assuming they don't spontaneously combust in the bright light. The cycle of violence is never ending, and even sane people have begun killing each other over dwindling water supplies. I give it a week. Queen of Rot, Earth 67349. Case file of Mark, redacted, December 17, 2024. Avery's really screwed the pooch on this one. Send some probes out into space. Typical exploration stuff. Honestly, not malicious like some of the other universes, but they found a floating city way out past the edge of Charon, one of Pluto's moons at the edge of our solar system. This place was just floating through the void, a seemingly abandoned ancient city on an asteroid that was probably the size of our moon. The architecture was odd, irregular angles, tessellated buildings that looked nearly impossible for any living being to enter. It was something that Lovecraft would have had a heart attack and climbed into an early grave over if they found it when he was alive. Avery's ended up seeing that it was hurtling toward Earth at a rather fast rate, enough to get it here within a few months at least, and saw that it could cause some massive damage. Maybe their intentions were actually good for once, and they wanted to stop it. Maybe they just wanted to scrape out any secrets they could before the end. Either way, they sent some researchers to it. I guess you could say we were lucky. Cleo, one of our cognizant techs in Observation Division, was part of the research crew that was sent in that world. We got her to hook up to one of the headsets and piggyback with her other self, giving us first-hand details on what went down. They arrived a few weeks ago, everyone in their atmosphere suits, ready to set out. Cleo was definitely nervous, and I can't say I blame her. After seeing other versions of yourself die in horrible ends, it kind of takes a toll eventually. Still, she volunteered and said she was going to see it through. I kept an eye on her as they started to disembark, landing their ship on one of the more flat areas of the strange asteroid. As she set off, she described what she was seeing to me. Walking around the city was like something out of a video game. Everything seemed solid, structures surrounding them on every side. But for every point that looked like a door or window, there was some sort of barrier keeping them from going in. It looks like there's nothing blocking the way though, but just an invisible layer of something. When one of the scientists touched the barrier, it seemed to repel him, pushing him back, though not with a lot of force. After about an hour exploring the city, they found the pit. It was definitely different. The edges of the pit weren't rounded. It wasn't like a sinkhole or anything, but a massive carved-out basin. Carved into the side were vaguely humanoid reliefs, faces twisted in terrified screams, and held hand out to point toward the center. Cleo started losing it a little here. She said there was someone in the center of the pit. A woman. Not wearing any kind of Atmos suit or anything like that. She was just sitting there, naked, body fused into the stone below as she appeared to sleep, hair floating all around her, loose in the low gravity. The researchers all drew straws to see who would go down to investigate further. Not that it would go very far anyway. Cleo was the one picked, and using some utility rope they brought along, lowered herself slowly into the basin, being careful not to step on any of the carvings as she stepped down. As she went though, she noticed that they weren't quite human looking. Many of them had at least 6 eyes, not only at the top of their face, but extending down around their mouths. These mouths, open in screams of pain and terror, were shown to have long tongues carved inside, barbs on the end. Cleo tried not to look, as the other version of her continued her descent, closer to the woman in the lower level of the basin. As she approaches, she notices that the woman looks different from the carvings. Closer to us. Regular. Human. Cleo gets closer, watching as her sleeping face is framed by floating hair. Cleo tries to look around her, noticing that the stone growing up from the ground is encasing the woman from the waist down, pinning her to the earth. The rock continues up past her head, almost holding her like a throne that she's strapped on. As Cleo does her examination, tracing fingers along the stone and noting etchings of runes in the sides, she accidentally brushes the woman's arm. She wakes. 12 eyes suddenly open all over her face, mouth gaping wide in a scream that somehow cuts through the empty void of space. Cleo in our world throws the headset off as the woman screams, holding hands to her ears as she tries to stop the frequency. It's rare that anything happening in the other universes physically affects any of us. It's not like the headsets have a neural link or anything like that. It's just like watching a movie from someone else's POV. Cleo is broken though, the scream driving her insane as she starts muttering about angels and someone, I'm assuming the woman, named Lilith. December 18, 2024. Cleo has been carving runes on the wall of a room, though none of us can figure out what they mean. We've all tried talking to her, but she's just not who she was. She's broken. I looked in on my alternate in that universe this morning to see if anything new had happened. The floating city has sped up, speeding towards Earth even faster now. News reports say that none of the researchers have sent word back about what they found, but everyone is told that they should get underground as quickly as possible. It was due for impact within hours. December 19, 2024. There was no impact. The city stopped right outside the atmosphere of Earth, throwing gravitational fields on their heads. The woman has grown large, breaking apart the city along with the entire asteroid that it sits on, revealing a huge network of nerves and veins underneath. As the rock breaks apart, it falls through the atmosphere down to Earth, raining debris on the humans who have so far survived the gravitational anomalies. Some get hit by the debris, dying instantly. That's probably the most merciful death possible for them. Those that are still alive start to become affected by the falling debris. Something about it gives off massive amounts of radiation. This in turn causes humans to begin wasting away, decomposing at a quick rate while somehow staying alive. The rot begins to work its way across the Earth as the woman stays up in space, observing the decomposing world below. The rot spreads quickly thanks to how widespread the debris is, affecting everyone within miles of a piece of it. Before long, it begins to move to nature in the area as well. No organic matter is safe. Human, animal, plant, everything begins to decompose and rot. Those capable of movement and thought are left in painful states of decomposition, desperately trying to find a way to cure themselves or care for others as they rot away in their arms. It's harrowing. My own duplicate in this world begins to rot almost immediately. I'm observing from the headset when my other begins to see his legs rotting away below him, leaving him unable to move as it works up around him. I was living by the sea, and as I'm trapped there, I can look out my window towards the beach, seeing dead fish and whales washing up on shore, their bodies nearly rotten down to the skeleton. The last things I see through the fading vision of my duplicate is the queen of the floating city coming down, the massive network of nerves and veins dipping into the ocean as she touches the surface. As she settles into our world, It appears that the nerves integrate into the earth. Suddenly, my other can see flowers beginning to bloom from his decomposing body, roots coming from the ground below to take him over. She revives the earth in her own preferred image, full of wildlife and flowers, as land and rock begin to warp, tessellating into strange shapes while she sets in. There's a brief attempt by governments to fight her, launching missiles toward her as she rests in the ocean. But around her, it's like a massive field of decay. The metal and components on the missiles rust, disintegrating into dust before they can reach her. The flowers are beautiful. They're the last thing I can see before the headset goes dark, my duplicate self dying from the exposure. That was the last universe that went through an apocalyptic event so far. I've been scanning through telescopes and satellite feeds to make sure there's no city floating off near the edge of the solar system. And so far, there's nothing. I'm going to keep an eye out though. Through everything, I've found Avarise all over the terrible events that bring other worlds to an end. Since then, I've been looking everywhere, making sure they don't have any kind of foothold in our world. The collective is aware of them now, so hopefully that means we'll be able to stop them before they get any chance to bring this kind of evil here. I don't know if they're a multiversal constant, but they pop up often enough to be on our radar. The entropy investigation is going well. The guys in development are figuring out that the universes we see end are usually going through a massive entropical burst. When these events happen, as long as we can keep an eye out on our own measurements, we may be able to prevent any kind of special circumstances that could lead to apocalyptic events here. It also might help cut down on the amount of tears we've been seeing aberrations slip through, so that could help a ton. If I have any other case files that might be of note, I'll update. In the meantime, keep a close eye on your surroundings. We monitor a lot, but can't see everything you know. If we want to keep our universe going, it's going to take effort. From everyone